You know, Smithers, I think I'll donate $1 million to the local orphanage. When pigs fly.
That's a good one. Hey, will you be donating that $1 million now, sir?
No, I'd still prefer not.
Hello and welcome to the Hypertrophy Odyssey, chapter 298. It is the first day of the week, aka the Kamehameha workout. I am feeling pretty good, very excited for this workout. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. We're going back, aka to the 7 virtues, looking at the next one along the list. There were 2 that were vying for me today, but one came up because something came up because of it. Charity, which is obviously the title. Charity is one of the 7 virtues, which is a very interesting virtue, I think, mostly because at a certain point, I feel like I think a good chunk of good people, there you go, I have to preface this a lot, but those people in particular want to be charitable. I think a lot of people have the idea that they want to be charitable, but realistically they're probably not charitable. And that's kind of a whole other subject matter. The belief that you are trying to do good in reality, but honestly you aren't, because you can't, what you are doing is not charitable in the grander sense, if that makes any sense. But that's a whole other subject for all of the day. I think this in general, I just want to look at charity and being charitable to others in multiple facets. I think that is the best way to look at this. And I think just not the mechanisms behind it, nor the, we're not going to look at like the people who think they're charitable but aren't really, or the people who expect things back from charity. I don't want to talk about that. That's a little too next level. I might dabble in it, but I really want to just talk and look at charity as in the act of giving, really, and all the things that it could mean, you know, and the reasoning behind it and why it probably is good for you to be charitable to others, whether it be emotionally or, you know, monetarily or whatever the charity a person would need in theory. You know, you never know what that thing could be, because it could be something very different for somebody else. It just all depends. I also might not get into it, but I'm not 100% sure, but I think might touch upon like people who accept it, but then are repeated beggars of it, but that's kind of different in a sense as well. So this one's going to be really weird to look at, and it's because I was listening to a story earlier where like a guy was giving this other guy like he gave a homeless guy money, but then all of a sudden like this guy ended up following him randomly, and that's how he got his like a stalker and stuff, and it's like, oh geez. But I don't want to look in the negative senses of these things. I probably will for a little bit, but I think that when looking at these virtues, you'd want to see why they would do it and what's the antagonist sin, I guess, against what would be the charity, right? Wouldn't it be greed in theory? Yes, of course. So that would be the antagonist to this. But I think I just want to look at it in that perspective, I guess, and just looking at it from the idea that you want to be more charitable with things. You don't want to hoard all your money, but you have to also be careful on who you give it to, you know, and also not expect things back. But we'll get into all of that and a bunch of other details, because this is a very, very open-ended one, to the point where there probably will be another episode about like every single subject matter I just talked about, because there's so many things really that you can go down the rabbit hole of charity in general. So with that being said, we'll start at general and then try to narrow it down somewhere. And with that being said, I will see you on Mother Base.
All right, so I started this day off with dips, which were pretty good. But anyways, to the main subject matter for today. Charity, one of the 7 virtues. But before we get into it, let's look at it from its definition. Charity, noun, 1. Generosity and helpfulness, especially towards the needy or suffering. Aid given to those in need. B. An institution engaged in relief of the poor. C. Public provision for the relief of the needy. 2. Benevolent goodwill towards or love of humanity. A gift for public benevolent purposes. Interesting. I just wanted to establish the idea that what charity is before we actually discuss it. Because realistically, I think that most people understand what charity is. Giving to those who are in quote unquote less fortunate than your state. Now, you would hope to become to a point where you can be charitable to other people, but that can vary wildly depending on what you would consider where your level of the world is. Many a times when I was not working, seeing homeless people come up to me and ask me for money was like, dude, I don't even have a job. I'm barely getting by, dude. So it's very interesting. But even then, you are in a different world than them because you are, in a car or something like that. And I wanted to establish the idea of charity before we talk about any other part of it. The sin that this goes against is the sin of greed, which makes sense because when you're greedy, you want to contain or control as much as you can to yourself versus giving any part of it to others. Now, charity itself is a good thing. I think most people can agree to help those who are in need or less fortunate than yourself. The issue is, and I don't want to go too into this, the act of giving charity has been tainted by a lot of things, whether it be only done because of, let's say, tax breaks, or because of the people who are receiving it aren't necessarily the best people to be receiving it. They may be needy and not doing anything with the charity that they're receiving. And I think this has to kind of do with today's society, but also just generally, I think this has always been an issue, but it's been exacerbated more and more now in recent times, more than not. I think that that's the only issue with this. I think being charitable is something that we can all strive to do, especially because we are all in different parts in our lives, but there are other people that are worse off than we are for the most part. I mean, hell, unless you're watching this video on a library computer, I'm pretty sure you're watching it on a phone, which most people have, but not every single person has. And there's a few other things like that, maybe in a house somewhere with Wi-Fi, things like that, where we have to be reminded that these things we do take advantage of and take for granted, but as well, there are other people out there that are in a less fortunate state than us. The thing is, as well, it's not necessarily by leagues. I think when it comes to charity and stuff like this, you would think of it as someone rich and or someone with a lot of wealth giving down to those who don't have nearly as much. It's a weird middle ground trying to reach it in between being there, because you are not that many steps away from being the person underneath you, realistically. So it's a little weird, tough balancing act, especially when you are at this stage, because you're not necessarily that far away from where you need the charity yourself. So it's an interesting thing to at least think about. And I feel like now charity has become a sort of a crutch for certain people in order to be seen as a good thing, as seen as I give to charity. But realistically, a lot of the time they just do it so that they seem good rather than actually mean the act of giving back to those who actually need it. And then you have those who just straight up scam people straight up from charity. There was a recent controversy with a VTubing company that ended up pocketing like $500K from a charity from a charity stream that one of their YouTubers did for them. And that's insane, because then they just closed up shop and then we're like, all right, see you guys. Did not explain what happened to the money. And that also is something that is an issue, but I think we'll touch upon that later on, really, because I think that's a whole other episode on itself. But I think when it comes to charity, I think it's mostly a good. I think everybody can agree on it. It's just hard to do, specifically because what once was the middle class, or at least people that were a little more well off than others, is slowly becoming less and less of a class really in society, and thus it's starting to get to the point where it's the haves or have-nots, and it makes it harder to be charitable to those people, as well as the people who you are charitable to, but you realize realistically they're not doing anything, and or they're just trying to take advantage of the emotional state that others are put into when they see somebody that is in, quote, shambles, end quote, but in reality they just get in their car and then go home as you realize that they're actually a panhandler, and essentially you've given to nothing. You've given to somebody who is just wasting your time, really, and made you, basically scammed you out of whatever you gave them. And it sucks when that type of stuff happens, because then it ruins it for people who are actually in need. I also have to mention the fact that charity doesn't have to be necessarily monetary only. I think that as long as you are trying to do something beneficial to someone, whether it be give them food or be there feelings wise or being there emotionally, there you go, or things like that, where you can actually help the person out in a whatever way or that you can, it is still a good thing. I think that because of that fact that we conflate now with monetary charity with regular charity, I think that that's kind of ruins the entire idea of it, because we don't see as being charitable to others in the sense that, like, you could just hear them out. You can just honestly just be open or receptive to their ideas. And I think that that is also another issue with it as well, because even if you are open and listening to their ideas, sometimes they won't return the charity in that sense, or they will take advantage of what you're saying and implement whatever their worldview is upon you. And it kind of always leaves a bad taste in others' mouths when they try to be open to somebody else's world or just try to listen to them, but they just don't want anything in return, and in fact will attack you for even having tried to help them out. And I think that even when there is no monetary incentive or anything like that, or just a monetary transaction even happening, I think it's crazy that even then we have issues there in a different sense, where it's like a hate or like a seen as a lesser than type of ideal. And that's another issue with it, is it's almost as if those who are getting charity are looked down upon, but realistically they're not necessarily, but also they feel like they are looked down upon. And it sucks, because then it's like a weird kind of like a never ending catch-22 of being damned either way. And it truly sucks, because you would want to be charitable to others in whatever way, shape, or fashion you can be, but really the only real way to do that is to go from up to down, and nobody wants to be in the down part, really.
Come on.
Why don't you just take my blood? Yes, I'm old.
And we're back. Welcome to the workout debriefing. Exercises not filmed, none. Exercises skipped, also none. Got everything in, thankfully. But anyways, to the main subject matter at hand today. Charity. And charity is a tricky one, because I like the idea of charity. I think everybody loves the idea of charity. But it is something that can be easily taken advantage of easily by people who are very manipulative. And it is shitty that we have to live in such a society where charity like that can be manipulated by others. Of course, I'm talking about usually the Western cultures here. Eastern cultures are a little bit different, but that's a whole other conversation for a whole other subject. Even some Middle Eastern cultures are a little bit more charitable, but that's another conversation as well. A lot of this really is the basis of when looking at it from different perspectives. Charity as a whole is good. I think that most people can agree on that. It's usually the things that surround it that are usually shit. It's kind of crappy to think that we can't really be charitable to one another human without some weird expectation given on it, whether it be going to be a bad interaction, or they're not going to use it for what you want them to, or the fact that you have an idea of what they should be using it for, that idea. But then again, you understand inherently, and I think most people understand it inherently, that if you were given something, you shouldn't be using it for something else. Like, for example, if I donate $5 to to some homeless guy, I'm hoping to God that he doesn't turn it around and try to buy booze with it. It's kind of the same thing, or crack even. I think most people inherently understand that. And I think those who try to go against that and say, well, it's his $5, he should do whatever he wants with it. Those people are the reason why people aren't charitable anymore, is because you allow people to not have the consequences for when they are given something. I think that is probably the essence of this entire idea, is that if we're going to be charitable, you have to be charitable with cause and with certainty, which is a very hard thing to do nowadays. Even there are some people who will be the recipients of charity and be ungrateful for the people because they feel like they were either exploited or manipulated into believing that they were exploited, which happens probably quite a lot. And it's kind of saddening, really, because then you have a stigmatism that all of a sudden comes around the idea of charity, which we all agree is good, but we can't do it, unfortunately, because there's too many bad apples out there ruining it for the rest of us, really, where we could be charitable to each other and others, but because this one person fucked it up, now all of a sudden we have to be either guarded with our own things, or if we receive it, if we aren't extra grateful, then the other person's going to be like, what the hell? Or if we're ungrateful in its entirety, then what the hell's wrong with you, dude? Come on. Nobody's going to want to help you out ever again. It's a very tough one. Out of all of the virtues, I don't know if this would be the toughest one, because there's one more that's a little tougher because everything's around it, but we'll get to that one when we get to that one, probably next week. This one is just tough because of the fact that I don't think enough people have enough trust in society in order for it to be an applicable virtue that most people can enjoy, because of the fact that people are assholes and it sucks. So it's something that we want to try to show people, but unfortunately the prevailing greed will prevail for the most part. It's a very unfortunate thing. The best I can say and best I can do is tell you that you can hope to God that you can give your charity to somebody who actually deserves it and will be grateful for it, but you have to do a lot of inner emotional searching and also cognition sensing and a bunch of other stuff just to make sure that they are who they say they are, and they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do. They're not just going to scam you out of whatever money you're giving them or whatever thing that you're giving them, whether it also be a mental charity. You're throwing them a bone, whatever the proverbial bone is. It could be metaphorical. So, well, it probably is metaphorical. You're not going to actually throw them a bone, but still, you get what I'm trying to say, I hope. But it sucks that we have to live like this, and this one is probably the one that I think we would all agree we should be going around more. And I think that's also the frustrating part about it, is that we all agree charity, yes, we can't do it though. We cannot do it. Those who are trying actively, thank you, because you're actually trying something. But those who are actively going against it by being either ungrateful or demanding nonstop or never really using the charity for the actual reason that it's there for, you are ruining it for the rest of us. Regardless of whether you think they are or not, they are realistically, they are ruining it for everybody. And those who are naive to deny that are ruining it for the rest of us. So please, if you ever think, hey, maybe I should donate to somebody or do something, make sure that they're actually doing it. Understand that that's what they're actually doing. Don't donate to somebody like Susan G. Komen, who only donates a penny per dollar that they get for the breast cancer. Don't do stupid shit like that. Understand that there's better examples of charity that are out and around there, and also aren't just donating to other family members who happen to open a non-profit. That's another story for a different day. But with that being said, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions about this one. This one was more of the continuation of this series of looking at the 7 virtues. We are approximately halfway through now, I believe, the 7 virtues. We have 3 more left, I believe. I don't know. I can't count. But anyways, tell me your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with anybody who may or may not like it. I will be back on tomorrow with a new video. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the next one. Keep it heavy. Stay safe out there. Stay cool. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.